For historical context and more information, see the description below.
John Ruskin once said that the greatest thing that a human soul ever does in this world is to see something. He said hundreds of people can talk to one who can think, but thousands can think for one who can see. To see clearly is poetry, prophecy, and religion all in one. He was not writing, of course, about the kind of seeing in which so many people engage, because he knew that a good many folk see with very restricted vision. Some of them see through the thinking of their political party. Some see through tradition. Some see through their educational or their religious training. And it is true that a good many people just see by the morning newspaper. Ruskin wasn't talking about that. He was talking about the kind of sight whereby a person comprehends that which he is seeing, or at least comes as close to comprehension as is humanly possible. We find it referred to many times in the Bible. Jeremiah said, "See ye and know. Stand ye in the ways and see." Jesus said, "Therefore I spake unto them in parables, because they seeing see not." And in the Sermon on the Mount, he said that the light of the body is the eye. Now, not just casual sight this, but seeing into things, understanding things. There is a phrase in that letter to the Ephesians that seems to sum it up. The writer tells us that he has been remembering the people in his prayers. It was his desire that God would give to them wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of him. And then these words, "the eyes of your understanding being enlightened." The Revised Standard Version and Dr. Moffat's translation speaks of the eyes of your heart being enlightened. And of course, that is a good translation. For well has it been pointed out, for that citadel of the soul which stands guard over love and hate, loyalty and treachery, trust and mistrust, we still have no better word than heart. So we find such words in the Bible as "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." Out of the heart of man proceeds evil thoughts. It has this faculty, you see, of not only seeing the good, but also seeing that which is evil. The Lord looketh on the heart, and so on. But for me, the new translations do absolutely nothing in this particular section in Ephesians. There's something very pointed and something very penetrating and something very incisive and clear about the word understanding. The eyes of your understanding being enlightened. It suggests bringing our minds to bear on the subject. It suggests weighing the significance and the insignificant. It suggests looking beyond the obvious. For we do so frequently have but partial vision. How easy it is in this time of year to walk through a garden and see nothing but the visible flowers that are there, or hear the birds that are singing there, and never for a moment see the great power which may be behind it. We see a man defeated, and we see nothing but that defeat. We do not think in terms of the great struggle that he may have put up in order to achieve victory, and that a lesser man might have been defeated long ago. The physical eye doesn't see these things. I suppose as good an illustration of any is that of St. Paul on the road to Damascus. We're told that Paul did see a great light and he was temporarily blind. And then, opening his eyes, he saw nothing. Now that's significant, because on that road to Damascus, Paul had seen a new light for himself and a new truth for his living. The kind of thing that is not visible to the physical eye. And naturally, when he opened those physical eyes, he saw nothing. Now, if we're successful in using our sight, there are many rewards. In the first place, one becomes so much more aware of the touch of God about. And no one, of course, can be truly religious without this. We can talk all we please about having a canned prayer, if you will, at the beginning of a class. But in a sense, this can be just a sop thrown to religious people. It's not going to do very much for our students one way or the other. Until we can come to that place where we have worked into our curriculum at least something that has to do with the history of religion. If we can teach to our children the biographies of men like Alexander and Hannibal and shysters like Napoleon, surely we can teach them something about the history of religion as it has to do with Isaiah and Jeremiah without going into theology at all. But we're not going to have a religious people, you see, until we're having concern for our youngsters in this area of doing those things that make them to be aware of God. And it may be in putting up such a great struggle for this thing of having a few lines of a prayer means that we're using the big howitzers to destroy a woodshed. No, this awareness of God is an important thing in the living of the Christian. A little girl went into her mother and she said, "Mother, I wish I had Granddad's eyes. He sees nothing but hope in everything." And the mother replied, "My dear, it's not his eyes that you need. What you need is his understanding." And of course she was right. This understanding that enables one to look upon a thing and to see things that are not so visible to the physical eye. Perhaps you remember the book that was written some time ago, Margaret Sherwood's The Worn Doorstep. It's the tender diary of an American girl who had fallen in love with an English soldier, and he died somewhere in France in the First World War. And so she determined that she was going to try to live the kind of life, at least as close as possible to the kind of life that they would have lived together. They had talked a great deal about the kind of house they were going to buy. And so she looked over much of England until she found that house. There she settled. She had many visitors. One was a hunted kitten, a prophetic forerunner of the suffering ones that were to come and find shelter there. Shortly afterwards, a weary woman came carrying a 7-week-old baby on her way from northern England to Salisbury, there to show her soldier husband his son. Then came a Belgian refugee. Then 2 boys were adopted into the home. Then a young couple was married there. Then a child was born in the home to another couple whose home had been destroyed by fire. The story is a tremendous reminder that even Gethsemane is a garden where may be grown roses and hollyhocks. It's a reminder that God is forever trying to put back into life a bit of beauty. You see him going to work as soon as tragedy or trial comes on a person. How he brings things in to brighten up the day, and how he gives the Spirit a lift. Gethsemane, a place of roses and of hollyhocks. He does speak to us in the laughter and in the tears of little children, in the joy and the fellowship of our home. He speaks to us in the confusion that is about us as well as in the good things which are about us. He speaks to us in the thunder as well as the dawn. But to see him, we must go back and try to understand that first chapter of Ephesians. To see him, we must be taking some time to look with the eyes of understanding. It was the great naturalist, Richard Jefferies, who said, "So long as we have the patience to stay still for a while, the woods will proceed to take us into its confidence and reveal its treasure." I imagine this is one of our great problems. Strangely enough, when we used to go up to New Hampshire, where they have such beautiful sunsets, many times we never even noticed the sun going down until we went down to what they called the trysting spot. And there for about 20 minutes before sundown, we would sit and watch that great ball of fire disappearing behind the wooded hill. We don't stop long enough to appreciate what's speaking to us from out of the sunshine, or the sunset, or the sunrise. I wonder how many businessmen have Bibles in their offices. How many women have Bibles that are available quickly in the home. That occasionally, at least once in the day, that one would take just a few moments and stop to read one of the great Psalms or a part of the New Testament. It's so easy, you see, to go along to the road to Damascus, to open our eyes and see nothing. George Washington Carver had a favorite text. It was from the 121st Psalm, "I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord." And he explained, now that doesn't mean just to look at the hills without seeing anything. That means to search. Then, too, the understanding eye helps us to shut out the things that aren't pleasant to see. In the human eye, at the point where the optic nerve enters the retina, is a spot about the 1/12 of an inch in diameter that is totally blind. It's unlikely that this is a mistake in the human makeup. The eye, you see, is a photographic lens that is much more perfect than anything that man has ever devised. The fact is that the lens that man has manufactured sees too much. So the photographer plays tricks. In order to get the kind of picture he wants, he throws the lens a little bit out of focus, or he throws over it a dark cloth, that they may better see that which is essential. Probably this is why we have blind spots in our eyes. If human eyes were equally open to everything, if one could see out of the side of the eye as clearly as he can see from the front, it may be indeed that he would not be seeing as clearly as when a part of it is blacked out. At any rate, it's tremendously important to remember the symbol of that blind spot in the eye. And that it's a great thing now and then when we're tempted to see something unpleasant in a person that we shove that into the blind spot. It may be that we see a certain person that, so far as we can understand, has nothing but selfishness in him. But may it not be that we see this selfishness in him because we have been thinking of nothing but selfishness there? And what we need to remember most frequently is that when one points a finger at somebody else, there are always three fingers pointing at himself. And it may well be that that which we see in others that is distasteful grows out of the distasteful that is in us, first of all. We sometimes may look on one that we thought was a friend that is unsympathetic in our trouble. And hasn't it very frequently turned out that this person has appeared to be unsympathetic because he himself sometime recently has gone through a great grief? And he knows that it will be impossible to go to his neighbor and give his consolation there in case he would break down, and the last state would be worse than the first. So frequently we need to look upon things and upon people with this eye of understanding and ask ourselves, is there any time that we behaved like that? And if there is, we'll probably find the explanation for that person's conduct and what we ourselves have done. And always to give them the benefit of the doubt. I read someplace about a man who had lived for some 40 years with his wife, but it had been many years since he had given to her any real kindness. And then, like an elderly prodigal son, he came to himself. And one night he came home very penitent. He was going to take a new turn. And so he brought home a box of chocolates. And he threw his hat on the rack. He went over and affectionately kissed her. But there was no great rejoicing in her heart. No great rejoicing that there probably was here a great and a wholesome change coming over her husband that was sending at least a faint glimmer of hope for love over the horizon of indifference. She just accused the old rascal of being intoxicated. Many a time in the home, what might have been a turn in the road, what might have been a new grasp on life together, what might have been that thing which heads off divorce, is brushed aside because one party isn't willing to give the other the benefit of the doubt. the more one thinks upon this matter, surely he will eventually come to the place where he asks himself this question: what hope is any one of us going to have in the final judgment if we do not have a God who looks upon us with an eye of understanding? And he loves us and he accepts us, not because of what we are, but in spite of what we are. Then, too, when one is looking through the eyes of the heart or of understanding, he comes to the place where he'll keep on looking for something that he's unable to see at the first glance. It's a great blessing. When tragedy comes, especially when death comes into a family, it's a difficult matter to rise above bitterness. It's a difficult matter to understand. Friends come to us and they say, time will heal everything. Now that's utter nonsense. Someone has been taken from us that we love. Someone that was closer to us than life itself. Time can never heal that. We don't want it to heal. What is our love? Something that passes away with the calendar? We're going to miss that person, and we are going to feel pangs of loneliness for that person even unto eternity. This is what comes to us with the first look. But when we gaze at it for a few moments with the eyes of understanding, another light begins to appear. For often, you see, one must look for a long time if he is going to see the hand of God. And very often, this is what eventually comes to it. Although time has not healed the wound, certain compensations have begun to come into his life. He comes to feel that there is something in this universe, and he does feel it spiritually, deeply. Something in this universe is more concerned about his burden than anything else on earth. And that force is working, showing to him new tasks and new responsibilities and a new life that can come again, not because he has forgotten, but because he is remembering in a new way. This, you see, is what happens wholesomely in the face of sorrow and trouble. Time doesn't heal in the sense that we forget. God forbid. But if we are leaning upon God, he in his great love and his understanding teaches us how to remember in a new way. And faith begins to take hold again. Through God, he dares to wait. And he knows that the darkness has not put out the light. There is a light that will be shining forever for the man of faith. In 1881, the College of William and Mary closed its doors for 7 years. The battle of the Civil War had been fought up and down the peninsula. It left the college physically in ruins. Although it struggled to keep going during the bitter time of Reconstruction, it was finally overborne by a financial catastrophe. But every morning of those 7 years, every morning, President Hugh rang the chapel bell. There were no students. The faculty had disappeared. Rain was beginning to trickle through the roof. But President Hugh every morning rang the bell. It was an act of faith, a symbol of the determination that the college be kept alive. I imagine something of that spirit was running through the writer of the letter to the Ephesians. For often the bells of life are only kept ringing by the faith and the determination that keeps one looking, even when for the moment there seems to be nothing to see. And they're kept ringing by a faith in God's promise, by His ability to sustain us. It is my prayer that all of us in the weeks which are ahead, in this summer, are going to be able to look on life with such eyes of understanding that we shall never lose sight of the God who does keep watch over us, even unto eternity. For the Lord of hosts is always with us. How well I know it. And the God of Jacob is our refuge, even to eternity, through Christ our Lord. Amen.
We have presented a recording of this morning's worship service from the Shadyside Presbyterian Church, Amberson Avenue and Westminster Place in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Ministers of the church are the Reverend Dr. Howard C. Scharfe, the Reverend Dr. James H. Blackwood, the Reverend Richard M. Cromie. Organist and choir director was Russell G. Wickman. Today's sermon by Dr. Scharfe was titled The Eyes of Understanding. Your comments on these services are invited. Address them to Shadyside Presbyterian Church. Again, next Sunday at 11:06, be listening for another rebroadcast of the regular worship service from the Shadyside Presbyterian Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.